March 17, 1945. 23,000 feet above the German border, Captain James Harrington grips the yoke of his P-51 Mustang as flak bursts pepper the sky around his formation. 8 fighters, 40 miles deep into enemy airspace. His number 3 man radios in. Engine trouble. Smoke trailing from the cowling. The doctrine is clear. Damaged aircraft return home with an escort. 2 fighters peel off. Now there's 6. Harrington scans the horizon. The Luftwaffe knows this route. They've been watching, waiting. He can feel it. What he doesn't know is that the smoke isn't real. The engine trouble is theater. And in 15 minutes, the hunters will become the hunted. This is the story of how one American fighter squadron weaponized weakness and turned the oldest rule in aerial combat completely upside down. By early 1945, the air war over Germany has reached a brutal stalemate. Allied bombers pound industrial targets daily. Losses are dropping, but not fast enough. The Luftwaffe, though battered, still has teeth, experienced pilots. The new Focke-Wulf Ta 152s, the jets, the Me-262s, are appearing more frequently. Records suggest that in February alone, Allied bombers suffered over 400 losses to enemy fighters, despite total air superiority. The math is simple. Every bomber lost is 10 men. Every successful mission requires hundreds of escort fighters flying precise patterns. High cover, close escort, sweep ahead. It works, mostly. But the Luftwaffe has adapted. German controllers have become surgical. They don't engage unless the numbers favor them. They wait for stragglers, damaged aircraft limping home, escorts low on fuel breaking off early. The 357th Fighter Group, stationed at Leiston Airfield in England, has flown 312 bomber escort missions by March. They've seen the pattern. Luftwaffe fighters shadow the formations. They don't attack the main body anymore. Too risky. Too many Mustangs. Instead, they orbit at a distance, 20, sometimes 30 miles out, and wait for mistakes. A crippled bomber losing altitude. A fighter with a rough engine forced to turn back. That's when they strike. Fast, brutal. 4 or 5 German fighters dropping out of the sun onto 1 or 2 isolated Americans. Historians note that isolated or damaged aircraft had a survival rate below 30% once enemy fighters made contact. The standing order is protective. If an aircraft is damaged, send an escort, usually 2 fighters, sometimes 4. Get them home safe. It makes sense. It saves lives, but it's bleeding the formations dry. The brass tries everything. They add more fighters to each mission, but that stretches fuel reserves and leaves gaps elsewhere. They tighten the formations, but that reduces flexibility and makes escort fighters predictable. Some units experiment with leaving damaged aircraft unescorted entirely, gambling they can slip through alone at low altitude. Reports indicate those losses are even worse. The doctrine is ironclad: protect the vulnerable. Don't leave anyone behind. The Air Force built its reputation on that principle. In training, it's drilled into every pilot. A wingman never abandons his lead. An escort never leaves a cripple. And the Luftwaffe knows it. German fighter controllers have the American playbook memorized. They know when a P-51 starts trailing smoke, 2 more will peel off within 90 seconds. They know those escorts will be focused on the damaged plane, not scanning for threats. They know the math. 3 targets instead of 1. All distracted, all predictable. It's not a fair fight anymore. It's an execution. So when Captain Harrington walks into the operations briefing on March 12th with a proposal that violates every rule in the manual, the room goes silent. Harrington isn't a tactician. He's a line pilot, 26 years old, 31 missions. He's watched 3 wingmen get shot down escorting damaged aircraft in the past month. He's flown cover himself, felt the helplessness of being outnumbered and outpositioned while trying to shepherd a smoking Mustang home. But he's also watched how the Germans operate. They're disciplined, patient. They don't improvise. They wait for the pattern: smoke, separation, escort, and then they execute. The idea comes to him on a night mission returning from Nuremberg. He's watching a damaged B-17 trailing smoke, 4 fighters orbiting it like anxious sheepdogs, and he thinks, we're predictable. We're trained to be predictable. The Germans count on it. What if we gave them the pattern but changed what comes after? The idea is simple, dangerous, maybe insane. Fly a fighter that looks damaged, trail smoke, radio false engine trouble, peel off from the formation with an escort just like doctrine requires. The Luftwaffe will see it. They'll salivate. They'll commit. But the damaged aircraft isn't damaged. The smoke is from a system installed in the belly, a modified oil injection that creates a thick black plume on command, harmless to the engine. The escort isn't 2 fighters, it's 8, stacked at different altitudes, far enough out to be invisible, but close enough to converge in under 2 minutes. The Germans attack what they think is easy prey, and they fly straight into a meat grinder. The operations officer stares at Harrington for a long moment. The room is quiet except for the hum of the overhead lights and the distant sound of engines being tested on the flight line. Someone coughs. Another officer shifts in his chair. Finally, the operations officer speaks. "You want to use our own fighters as bait?" "Yes, sir. Voluntarily fly around looking crippled in the most dangerous airspace in Europe." "Yes, sir. That's the dumbest thing I've heard all week." The officer pauses, leans back. "When can you test it?" But then the resistance starts. The wing commander hates it. He calls it reckless gambling with American lives. 2 squadrons refuse to participate. The intelligence section warns that if the Luftwaffe catches on, every actual damaged aircraft will be slaughtered. The Germans will assume it's a trap and hit them even harder. There's also the mechanical problem. The smoke system has to work perfectly. Too much smoke and the engine overheats. Too little and it doesn't sell the illusion. The engineers at Leiston work for 3 days straight, testing ratios, checking temperatures. On the 6th test, a P-51 nearly catches fire on the runway. And there's the human problem. The pilot flying wounded has to commit fully. No breaking character. No defensive maneuvers until the ambush is sprung. If the Germans smell hesitation or see the other fighters too early, they'll scatter. That means flying straight and level, trailing smoke, while enemy fighters close in. It means trusting 8 other pilots with your life in a way that doctrine never prepared anyone for. Harrington volunteers to fly the bait plane on the first mission. His squadron commander overrules him. "If this works, we need you alive to teach it. If it fails, we need someone expendable." He assigns Lieutenant Paul Deckert, 22 years old, 18 missions. Deckert doesn't sleep the night before. March 17th, 1945. The date we opened with, the 357th Fighter Group launches at 0820 hours, 16 P-51 Mustangs. Mission: escort B-17s hitting synthetic oil plants near Leipzig. The weather is cold and clear. Visibility unlimited. The kind of day where you can see for 100 miles at altitude. The bombers cross the border at 0947. Flak is moderate. Black puffs blossoming in the sky, always behind or to the side, never quite on target. No enemy fighters. The Germans are waiting, watching. At 10:15, 30 miles inside Germany, Deckert flips the smoke switch. Black plume erupts from his engine cowling, thick and dramatic. It looks exactly like a catastrophic oil leak. He keys the radio. "Blue leader, this is Blue 3. I've got oil pressure dropping, engine temp rising. I'm aborting." His voice is steady, but there's an edge to it. Not fear exactly. Tension. Harrington, flying as Blue leader, responds. "Copy Blue 3. Blue 4, escort him home." Lieutenant Mike Kellerman peels off, joins Deckert's wing. To anyone watching, German radar operators, Luftwaffe pilots orbiting at a distance, it's textbook. 2 fighters separating, 1 damaged, 1 escort, heading west at reduced speed and altitude. The rest of the squadron continues east with the bombers, except 6 other P-51s are already moving. They don't follow directly. 3 climb to 28,000 feet, 5 miles north. 3 drop to 18,000, 7 miles south. They're invisible to anyone focused on Deckert and Kellerman, but they're closing the box. The geometry is precise, calculated, rehearsed. Every pilot knows his position, his angle, his timing. They've flown this formation in practice runs over England for 5 days. Now it's real. For 8 minutes, nothing happens. Deckert fights to keep his hands steady. The smoke is working, thick, black, dramatic, but every second feels like an hour. The sky is too big, too empty. He scans the mirrors, the canopy, the horizon. Nothing. Kellerman flies tight formation, scanning. He's the visible escort, the obvious target. If the Germans come, they'll try to kill him first, clear the way to Deckert. Both men know this. Neither mentions it on the radio. At 10:23, Kellerman sees them. 4 contacts high and east, coming fast. Blue 3 contacts at your 4 o'clock high. 4 bandits, FW Wonder 90s. Deckert doesn't turn, doesn't break. That's the discipline. That's the trap. His entire body wants to react. Bank hard, dive, run. The training screams at him. Evade, survive. But he holds the heading, holds the speed, keeps trailing smoke. The German fighters descend in a shallow dive. The lead pilot probably thinks it's his birthday. 2 American fighters, 1 trailing smoke, no help in sight. He's thinking quick kill, easy victory, home by lunch. Range closes to 3 miles. 2 miles. The Focke-Wulfs spread out, setting up a bracket attack. 2 from each side, scissors pattern, no escape. It's a classic maneuver, taught in every fighter school, executed 1,000 times over Europe. The Americans are boxed. Done. 1 mile. Harrington's voice crackles over the radio. Blue 3, execute. Deckert slams the throttle forward and yanks the stick. The smoke cuts off instantly. The crippled Mustang pulls a 7G climbing turn that no damaged aircraft could ever manage. The sudden violence of the maneuver grays out his vision for a moment. He blinks through it. Kellerman brakes opposite, drawing fire, buying time. And the other 6 Mustangs drop out of the sky like wolves. The German pilots realize the mistake in the last 2 seconds. Records suggest that one tried to dive away. Another attempted to turn into the nearest threat. It doesn't matter. The geometry is already decided. The trap has closed. Harrington takes the lead FW-190 with a 2-second burst at 400 yards. Deflection shot. Difficult. He leads the target perfectly. Tracers walk across the German fighter's engine, cowling and wing root. The Focke-Wulf rolls inverted and starts shedding pieces. Metal fragments glinting in the sunlight. The pilot doesn't bail out. Either he can't or he's already dead. 2 more P-51s bracket the second Focke-Wulf. He's dead before he finishes the turn. One Mustang attacks from high right, the other from low left. The German tries to split the difference and dies in the middle. His fighter explodes, a bright orange fireball at 22,000 feet. The debris cloud drifts east on the wind. The third German pilot has more luck. He extends into a dive, hits over 450 miles per hour, almost makes it to cloud cover. Almost. A Mustang flown by Lieutenant George Preddy, already an ace with 23 kills, runs him down and puts 100 rounds into his engine. The Focke-Wulf trails fire and smoke, real smoke this time. It noses over and disappears into the clouds. No parachute. The fourth Focke-Wulf escapes. Barely. He's faster than the Mustangs at low altitude, and the Americans don't chase. Harrington calls them off. Let him go. Let him report what he saw. That's part of the plan too. Let one survive. Let him tell the story. Let the Luftwaffe know that smoking American fighters might not be what they seem. Plant the doubt. Spread the fear. Total engagement time, 90 seconds. 3 German fighters destroyed. 0 American losses. Deckert's Mustang doesn't even have a scratch. Just some carbon scoring around the smoke system exhaust that the ground crew will clean off before the next mission. The squadron lands at Leiston at 12:40 hours. The intelligence officers debrief for 3 hours. Every pilot writes a report. Every detail is recorded. Gun camera footage is reviewed frame by frame. The film is clear, undeniable. The tactic worked exactly as designed. Within 2 days, the wing commander who called it reckless is asking Harrington to brief every squadron in the group. Within a week, 4 other fighter groups request the smoke system specifications. The engineers at Wright Field in Ohio start producing retrofit kits, 30 units by the end of March, over 100 by April. But the real impact isn't the kills, it's the psychological shift. The Luftwaffe stops attacking stragglers with the same confidence. German fighter controllers start second-guessing. Is that damaged American actually damaged? Or is it bait? How many fighters are hiding nearby? Radio intercepts from late March, translated after the war, show German pilots reporting increased American deception tactics and ordering more caution before engaging isolated targets. Some German squadrons stop attacking single or paired fighters entirely, too risky. The predator-prey dynamic reverses. Now every trailing smoke plume is a potential threat. The Luftwaffe's response time slows. Their aggression decreases. Bomber losses to fighter attacks drop by an estimated 18% in April compared to February. Historians note that this coincides with multiple tactical innovations, but the wounded bird tactic is cited in at least 11 post-war interviews with American and German pilots. The numbers tell part of the story, but not all of it. The psychological impact is harder to measure, but just as real. When a predator becomes uncertain, when a hunter questions whether the prey is actually prey, the entire dynamic shifts. The 357th Fighter Group runs the tactic 14 more times before the war ends. 5 result in successful ambushes. 3 draw no response. The Germans don't take the bait. 6 times, the Luftwaffe spots the trap early and refuses to engage. That's the trade-off Harrington warned about. The tactic only works until it doesn't. Once the enemy knows, once the surprise is gone, it becomes a bluff, and bluffs lose value fast. By mid-April, Luftwaffe pilots are briefed specifically on the American smoke deception. They're told to assume any smoking fighter is a potential trap, engage only with overwhelming force or not at all. There are costs. On April 9th, a P-51 from the 4th Fighter Group uses the smoke system during an actual emergency, not a trap, a real malfunction. The oil pressure gauge drops to 0. The temperature climbs into the red. The pilot activates the smoke to signal distress, hoping nearby friendlies will see and provide cover. 3 FW-190s spot him. They circle at a distance, watching, waiting. They assume it's bait and refuse to engage. The American makes it home. Lucky. The smoke that was supposed to draw enemies saved him by making them too cautious to attack. But on April 22nd, another pilot with genuine engine failure trails smoke near Munich. The Luftwaffe, now paranoid, sends 9 fighters to attack, assuming overwhelming force will counter any ambush. There is no ambush. The damaged P-51 and his 2 escorts are torn apart. All 3 pilots are killed. The German fighters swarm them like piranhas. No chances, no mercy. The tactic saves lives, and it costs lives. That's war. No innovation is clean. Every advantage carries a shadow. The engineers also report 7 cases where the smoke system malfunctions, 3 causing minor fires, 1 forcing an emergency landing. The system is pulled from operational use in late April, not because it doesn't work, but because the risk-to-reward ratio shifts as the Luftwaffe collapses. By May, there aren't enough German fighters left to justify the mechanical risk. The war is ending. Germany is burning. The Luftwaffe is down to fumes and desperation. The wounded bird tactic becomes a footnote, a clever trick that worked for 8 weeks in the spring of 1945. But the principle survives, the idea that weakness can be a weapon. That doctrine is only useful until the enemy learns it, that the best trap is the one that uses the opponent's assumptions against them. Post-war analysis shows that deception tactics, false radio traffic, feints, decoys, account for an estimated 12% reduction in bomber losses during the final 3 months of the European air war. The wounded bird is a small part of that, but it's the part that required the most courage, because flying the bait plane meant trusting not just your wingman, but the idea itself. Trusting that the trap would work when every instinct screamed to run. Deckert flies the bait plane 9 times. Harrington flies it twice when Deckert is grounded with flu. Other pilots rotate through. Every single one describes the same feeling. The longest 8 minutes of their lives. The weight of the smoke trailing behind. The knowledge that enemy fighters are watching. The discipline required to not break, not turn, not give away the game. Some compare it to being a tethered goat waiting for the tiger. Others call it the loneliest job in the Air Force. You're surrounded by friendlies, but you can't see them. You're bait, but you're also the trigger. Everything depends on your nerve. One pilot refuses a second mission, no shame in it. He's flown 43 combat missions, survived encounters with jets and flak and everything else the Luftwaffe can throw at him, but he can't do the wounded bird again, can't fly straight while enemies close in. Can't trust the invisible friends he knows are out there but can't see or hear until the moment of execution. The squadron commander reassigns him without comment. Not everyone is built for every job. That's not weakness. That's honest self-assessment. The tactic spreads beyond the 357th. The 4th Fighter Group adopts it in late March. The 56th tries it twice in early April with mixed results. The 352nd modifies it, using a damaged bomber as bait instead of a fighter, with 8 P-51s hiding in nearby clouds. That version works once, kills 2 Me-109s, then never works again. The Germans adjust. They always adjust. War is a conversation. One side speaks, the other responds. The wounded bird is a sentence in that conversation, a trick question, a feint. It works until the enemy learns the answer. Then, you need a new question. Some historians argue the tactic's real value wasn't the kills, but the uncertainty it created. Every damaged aircraft became ambiguous. Every separation from formation became suspect. The Luftwaffe wasted time and fuel investigating targets they used to hit without hesitation. Fighter controllers had to verify, double-check, commit more resources to simple intercepts. That friction, that hesitation, that doubt, those are strategic effects. They compound, they spread, they change how an enemy thinks and acts even when the tactic itself isn't being used. There's a photograph from April 1945, black and white, grainy. It shows 6 P-51 Mustangs on the hard stand at Leiston Airfield. 5 of them are standard, polished aluminum, invasion stripes, squadron markings. The 6th has a hand-painted emblem on the nose, a bird with a broken wing, holding a dagger. That's Deckert's plane, the one he flew as bait on the first mission. He names it Playing Possum. He flies it 23 more times before Germany surrenders. He survives the war, goes home to Pennsylvania, becomes a high school teacher. In a 1987 interview, a student asks him what it felt like to fly those missions. Deckard thinks for a long time. Then he says, "Every single time I thought they'd figure it out. Every single time I thought I was already dead. But they never did. They saw what they expected to see, and that was enough." The lesson isn't about smoke systems or ambush geometry. It's about the power of expectation. The Luftwaffe had every advantage: experience, skill, aircraft performance in certain envelopes. But they fought the war they expected. The Americans, desperate and outmatched in early years, learned to fight the war that was. Doctrine said, protect the vulnerable. Harrington said, become the vulnerable. Doctrine said, don't take unnecessary risks. The 357th said, risk is a weapon if you control when and how it's used. The numbers tell part of the story. 312 escort missions flown, 14 wounded bird operations executed, estimated 18% drop in bomber losses during the tactic's operational window, 8 American fighters ambushing 4 German fighters, reversing a death sentence into a turkey shoot. But numbers don't capture the moment when Deckard flipped that smoke switch for the first time. They don't capture the trust required, the fear managed, the gamble taken. The wounded bird tactic only lasted 8 weeks, but it proved something that every generation of warriors has to relearn. The enemy's greatest weakness isn't their equipment or their numbers. It's their certainty, their assumptions, the patterns they've learned to trust. And the moment you make those patterns a trap, you're no longer playing defense. You're writing the rules. Military historians study the innovation for lessons that extend beyond World War II. The same principle appears in different forms across different conflicts: the feigned retreat, the false retreat, the strategic withdrawal that becomes an ambush, the vulnerable position that's actually a kill zone. Modern air forces still teach the concept in different contexts. Not with smoke systems, obviously. Technology has moved on, but the underlying principle, that perceived weakness can be engineered advantage, remains valid. Electronic warfare uses it. Cyber operations use it. Special operations use it. Make the enemy believe they understand the situation. Give them a target that fits their expectations. Then exploit the moment when they commit. The window is always narrow. The enemy always learns. But for that brief moment when surprise is complete and execution is perfect, the advantage is overwhelming. Harrington receives a Distinguished Flying Cross for developing the tactic. He downplays it in the ceremony, says he just watched the Germans and gave them what they wanted. Doesn't mention the courage it took to propose something that violated every standard procedure. Doesn't mention the pilots who flew bait and lived with that fear for 8 or 9 or 10 minutes at a time. Doesn't mention that innovation in war is often born from desperation, from watching friends die, from refusing to accept that the only option is to keep doing what isn't working. After the war, Harrington stays in the Air Force, flies in Korea, retires as a colonel in 1963. In his personnel file, there's a note from his wing commander in 1945. It says, "This officer demonstrated exceptional tactical creativity and willingness to challenge doctrine when circumstances required it. He saw a problem, developed a solution, and executed it with minimal resources and maximum effect. Recommend for any position requiring innovative thinking under pressure." That's a quiet endorsement. No drama, no superlatives, just recognition that some officers see what others miss. The smoke systems themselves are mostly scrapped after the war. A few end up in museums. One is displayed at the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Ohio, installed in a P-51D fuselage cutaway so visitors can see the mechanism. The placard explains the tactic in 3 sentences. Doesn't convey the fear, or the trust, or the discipline, just the mechanics. How oil was injected into the exhaust stream. How the system could be activated and deactivated from the cockpit. How it created the illusion of catastrophic damage without harming the engine. But the real legacy isn't mechanical. It's conceptual. It's the understanding that in war, nothing is fixed. No tactic is permanent. No advantage lasts forever. The only constant is adaptation. The side that learns faster, that questions assumptions, that's willing to try something uncomfortable or dangerous or unconventional, that side writes the next chapter. The other side reads it and reacts. And then the cycle repeats. The wounded bird worked because the Luftwaffe was disciplined, because they trusted their training and their experience, because they'd seen the pattern hundreds of times and knew what it meant. And then one day, the pattern meant something different. That's the gap where innovation lives. That's the space where war changes. Not with new technology necessarily, not with more resources or better logistics, but with someone seeing the same situation everyone else sees and thinking, what if we turned this upside down? Deckard keeps a photograph of playing possum on his desk for 40 years. Students ask about it occasionally. He tells them it's from the war, tells them he flew fighters, usually doesn't elaborate. But sometimes, when a student is genuinely curious and asks the right questions, he tells the story. About flying as bait, about trusting invisible friends, about the moment when the trap closed and the hunters became the hunted. He always ends the same way. Says, the scariest thing wasn't the enemy. It was wondering if I'd done my job well enough, if I'd sold the act, if I'd stayed in character long enough. Because if I broke too early, if I gave it away, everyone died. Not just me, everyone. That's the weight of innovation. That's the burden of being first. You don't know if it will work. You can't know until you try. And trying means putting lives on the line. Yours, your friends, maybe people you've never met who will fly the same mission tomorrow because you proved it works today, or who won't fly it because you proved it doesn't. Either way, the responsibility is absolute. No one forced Harrington to propose the tactic. No one forced Deckard to volunteer. They chose it, saw a problem, developed a solution, accepted the risk. So, here's the question. If you were in command and a junior officer proposed using your own fighters as bait, would you have approved it? The doctrine says no, the risk assessment says no, every precedent says no, but the casualties keep mounting and the Luftwaffe keeps hunting stragglers, and something has to change. Do you trust the innovation? Do you trust the innovator? Do you accept the possibility that it might fail and men might die for an idea that didn't work? Or do you accept that men are already dying, and at least this is a chance to change the equation? There's no right answer. There's only the answer you could live with. And that's what makes command hard. That's what separates the officers who follow procedure from the officers who write new procedures. Harrington's wing commander approved the test. History remembers that as the right decision. But in March 1945, before the first mission, before anyone knew if it would work, it was just a decision, a gamble, a bet that weakness could be strength and that the oldest rule in aerial combat could be turned into a weapon. And for 8 weeks in the spring of 1945, over the skies of a dying Germany, that bet paid off.